Alongside the insiders, Chris Johnson and Pierre LeBrun. CJ, you've told us that McDavid and his camp are not going to appeal his 3-game suspension. Can you give us a sense of how they came to make that decision?
Well, I think the most important thing to highlight here is it's not an admission or an acknowledgement that they necessarily agree with a 3-game suspension that the NHL's Department of Player Safety has come down with on Connor McDavid. But, really when you look at the process with a suspension of this length, the CBA calls for it to be heard by Gary Bettman if it gets to an appeal. And historically, that's just not been a good way for other players in similar situations to see the ban reduced. It's just something you don't see happen too much. And so given what's gone on here, I think it's fair to say the Oilers and McDavid felt it was a stiff punishment, maybe a little bit of an overreach, but they've just decided to take their medicine. McDavid can return to the Oilers lineup next Monday, and he's going to move forward rather than push this back into the commissioner's hands.
All right, let's turn our attention to the trade front. And there was all kinds of talk about a deal becoming very close between the Rangers and the Canucks for JT Miller over the weekend. That didn't unfold. But Pierre, are we now at the point where we're saying when and not just if the Canucks are going to move Miller out of Vancouver?
Yeah, that's the sense that you get, Gino, when talking to people involved in this situation, that everyone seems to agree that the end result will be a trade eventually. What they can't predict is when exactly. Could be as early as this week, could be closer to the March 7th trade deadline, could also be this summer in the offseason, Gino. We could still be talking about this, so get ready for that. A couple things that are important to know. One is that Miller hasn't given the Canucks a list of teams that he would waive for, although in those conversations between his camp and the Canucks, there's a sense of the general parameters of the kind of team that would make sense. And yes, there are other teams other than the Rangers that have been in talks with the Vancouver Canucks. One of them is the Carolina Hurricanes, who are looking for an upgrade on offense. And the Hurricanes are looking to see what would make sense if they make an offer to trade for JT Miller. The New Jersey Devils, the Rangers' rivals, they've also been a late entrant in this, and they've held talks with the Canucks on JT Miller. I also think that internally, the Devils are trying to sort of suss out if it makes sense to go all in on this or not at this point and where they are. The Dallas Stars, with all of that cap money that they can spend with Tyler Seguin on the shelf, that's a team that a lot of people believe JT Miller might wait for. Will they make a pitch? So there are other teams involved, but one thing the Canucks have sort of changed their tune on, when this started 6-7 weeks ago in talks on JT Miller, the Canucks said, we need apples for apples. We're trying to make the playoffs here. We don't want to do a futures deal. The Canucks have relented a bit on that. They would do a futures deal when it comes to making a deal with a contender like a Carolina or a New Jersey, because they understand those teams don't want to trade away from their core. So still to play out here, but the Canucks are telling teams, we're not giving this guy away. We'll see where it goes.
What about the Oilers? They signed veteran D-man John Klingberg on Friday. He skated with the team on Monday. Could be in their lineup in under a week. But is that it for the Oilers? Or are they still looking for more help on the blue line, Pierre?
Yeah, there's a chance they add another piece to their blue line, Gino. I don't think it's going to be terribly sexy. That depends, of course, on injuries and how things play out between now and March 7th. But right now, I think they like their 7 guys, but maybe a little more depth. Think penalty killing. Now, their penalty killing's actually been top 5 in the league since November. They like what they have there, but this is just about adding depth. They want to have another long playoff run and another body on the back end, someone more in a shutdown role. That's the kind of thing they're looking at between now and March 7th.
What about Pittsburgh? Since Sidney Crosby signed his 2-year extension before the start of the season, we've been wondering what's going to happen to the team around him. Have the Pens made a decision on that, CJ?
Well, certainly they're adopting the posture of a team that's going to be shipping out some players between now and March 7th. And, what the Penguins are telling rival teams at this point is that, okay, Crosby, obviously off the table. You're not talking trade with him. Some of the other legacy players that can have Genny Malkin in the same spot. But beyond that, there really aren't any untouchables on that Penguins roster. And what Pittsburgh's looking to do is get younger. They'd like to trade some of their older players for younger NHL players as opposed to even prospects and draft picks, perhaps. And maybe one misconception that's out there, because there have been a lot of reports about the Penguins, they're not looking to retain salary on any of their players with multiple years left on their deal. And so, it's not as though someone like Erik Karlsson's going to get traded with salary retention spot. Pittsburgh has just one of those retention spots left, and obviously they'll be, careful with how they use it.
look at this and you think it must be really, really rough for Sid to sit and watch everything unfold around him the way it is. They are the insiders, Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun.